Hey everyone, I want to talk all about why OCD keeps coming back when you think you're recovered, how to handle those spikes and relapses, and what's probably going on, why fear is so subtle and plays a gigantic part of this, which is the fear of being stuck again, the fear of going backwards, the fear of developing a new theme, the fear of you trying to really compulsively not spiral. I hear that all the time on calls. They say to me, I really don't want to spiral. And I say to them, you're going to have to allow yourself to spiral because OCD knows if you're trying not to spiral, it's going to come in there and kind of capture that and really kind of set you off in that way to where it's just going to come in even stronger. So before I go any further, please subscribe, hit that like button, comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you thought you were recovered and when it came back. So I want to start off this video by saying something that can be very difficult for many people to hear, but it is really important to highlight this one specific aspect because it is something, it is a mistake that many people make. And that mistake is this. You are not in recovery if you're having multiple setbacks. Many people think they are in recovery when they have setback after setback after setback. But the definition of OCD and anxiety recovery is the absence of chronic anxiety, shame, or guilt. Intrusive thoughts have lost their intrusiveness and everything else in between. But it's not the continual suffering of relapses and having panic disorder and everything else in between. Now, an important part of the recovery process and the recovery journey is experiencing symptoms along the way. But on top of that, that doesn't mean you've actually hit OCD and anxiety recovery. So I know that can be very difficult to hear. There are a lot of posts out there talking about this is what OCD recovery means to me. I always tell people to be very, very careful when they hear those types of statements, especially this is what OCD recovery means to me. There's no such thing as this is what OCD recovery means to me. There is only one definition of OCD and anxiety recovery, and that is the absence of chronic anxiety and shame and guilt, depersonalization and derealization, intrusive thoughts, images, sensation, urges have lost their intrusiveness in that bullet-like fashion, and 99% of the time you can't tell you have OCD for very, 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 very long periods of time. That doesn't mean you might have a bleep here and there, but if you're having strong relapses that last a week or 2 weeks, in between that process, there's a really good chance that you haven't reached OCD and anxiety recovery, especially because that's how it works. Now, this is an understandable part of the process. And again, it is important to have definitional terms. And the reason why it's important to have definitional terms is because when we have verbiage that means different things to different people, there could be no consensus on what a lot of those things mean. Now, this is always a great conversation and up to interpretation, but we're kind of seeing it in the sobriety world as well. I just got done reading a brand new addiction magazine where they were talking about, sobriety means different things to different people. And this is a very dangerous thing. There's only one definition of sobriety. True sobriety is no drugs, no alcohol, and nothing that alters your state of mind for long periods of time. It's not, you drank 30 beers a day and now you drink on the weekends. That's not sobriety. You are consuming alcohol. And the same would be true if you were doing a hard drug. Now, I know this is something that can get a lot of kickback, but it is very important to face that. Now, what happens after you're having long periods of time where you're feeling good? This is what we see the most. When someone is having a large period of time of feeling good, they usually will go through these periods where they will come back and it will seem different. Oh, it's different this time. It's a new anxiety symptom. It's shame or guilt this time. It's depersonalization and derealization. But there's actually nothing different that's happening. All that's happening is you had a period of time where OCD was more than likely dormant in the background. It was lingering. And during that lingering period, OCD really came to kind of seem like it was gone. And then you still had some minor compulsions. You still had some minor avoidance behaviors. I say this to people on the phone all the time. They ask me, well, this wasn't a problem before. Why are we even talking about this? And I say, just because it wasn't producing an emotional consequence doesn't mean it wasn't a problem. There was many things in my life that I was doing that were avoidance and compulsion behaviors, very subtle behaviors, even towards the back end of sensory motor recovery, based around my body dysmorphia and conditional self-acceptance, but they weren't producing any sort of emotional disturbance. So in my mind, I thought I was good. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. Deep down, I still knew I was performing compulsions and avoidance behaviors and still engaging in things that were keeping me stuck. That perspective, understanding that perspective was so key to my overall progress. So what do you do when you have a setback or a relapse? The best thing you can do for yourself is nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean you're not changing anything. You're not making any drastic changes to your recovery process. You don't have to jump to the books again. You don't have to jump to new exposures. You don't have to jump to this or jump to that. The reason why that's so key to understand is, and I always use this analogy, you'll never hear someone besides the OCD recovery books, if someone is reading a book, let's say they've read XYZ book on something, they'll never be like, oh my God, I have to go back and read that book again. But they'll do that with the first book on the reading list. How to Suddenly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything, Yes Anything, or anything else of that in between. But they're not actually doing that with some of the other books they've read in their life. So that goes to show you the compulsiveness of those particular things. And I think that is very, very important to cover. You don't have to reach out compulsively for help. Give it a couple weeks, give it a couple months, see how you feel. If you're still feeling chronic anxiety, shame, and guilt, if you're still experiencing OCD symptoms, then reach out and ask for some help. But what you don't want to do is immediately, once you have a big relapse, is actually reach out quickly. Because when you reach out really quickly, like the day of a spike, the day of a relapse, the day of increased symptoms or chronic anxiety, what you're telling yourself is that you can't handle the way those symptoms feel. And then you go towards that over and over again. It becomes this compulsive cycle. That's something that you don't want to do. It's something that I did. It was a mistake that we all make, but you want to refrain from making those mistakes as best as you can. And it will take some practice. It will take time to actually learn that, to not need to reach out when you're feeling at your worst. It doesn't mean you should never reach out, because that's what OCD sufferers do. They're saying, oh, you're telling me I could never reach out. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that reaching out needs a balance. It needs a very, very, it's a medium. It's a balance of, I can sit with this discomfort. I don't have to reach out right now. I can allow myself to feel like that. So it's important to remember, if you're having setbacks and relapses consistently, every month, every other week, you're not in recovery. It's very, very important to remember that. That's part of unconditional life acceptance, accepting that you are not recovered, accepting that you have work to do on your recovery process, that you have not actually made the progress, the full progress that you might be looking for. You can accept your position. You can also accept that you can't accept, but there is not multiple definitions of OCD and anxiety recovery, just like there's not multiple definitions of sobriety, just like there's not multiple definitions of financial freedom. Financial freedom means that you have money coming in passively to pay your overhead and your bills for the remainder of your life coming from assets. That's what financial freedom means. It doesn't have multiple definitions. Now, there are other things like that, spirituality and things like that are more open to interpretation, and so can the other ones too. But it's very rare that some of these big definitions have multiple definitions. We do that as a society to give people hope and what they can reach for. Because when you have an OCD sufferer and they're like, oh, OCD recovery is multiple relapses, that sets the tone for what they have to look forward to, and that gets them very, very down, because they're like, well, what's the point of even being here if that's what recovery is going to be? I'm just going to kind of go through this process of like relapse and this and that and this and that and this. So it is really key to realize that that is one of the most important things when it comes to OCD and anxiety recovery, is understanding the verbiage, understanding what definition of recovery means, understanding that it can't mean different things to different people, that it has one definition, and that one definition instills hope. It gives people something to look forward to, but also accepting that you haven't reached that goal yet, and that is super, super key. And that is the real reason why OCD keeps coming back, because of the fear of being stuck again, the fear of not making progress, the fear of going back to square one, the fear of losing control. And especially when you develop a new fear, a new theme, or something that hasn't been there for a while, because it feels so real. I always tell people, and I think this is a good place to end it, when you're chronically suffering with OCD and your anxiety-based disorder and you're always suffering, there's no need to, you're always suffering. So there's not really a relapse happening or a setback or a backdoor spike, whatever the verbiage is, because you're always thinking of a particular thing and you're like, I'm suffering like this all the time. This is what it is. But when you have periods of time where you're feeling a lot better on the symptom perspective, that's when it's very easy for it to come back and make it feel like it's real and new. So keep putting the progress in, chip away day by day. Remember, it's a slow process. When you have a relapse or a backdoor spike, you don't have to go back and read the books on the reading list. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do any forced exposures and everything else in between. So thank you so much for watching. Again, if you're interested in our coaching and webinar services, please email us at info@ocdrecovery.com, and we'll get back to you in a timely fashion. And again, write me down below anything you think about this particular topic. And like I've been saying in all my recent videos, I've been picking and choosing topics and questions that people have been asking, and I've been going through those and breaking those down in particular videos. And I think some people have some really good questions that a lot of people would like to hear. So ask those questions, and I write them on my video list. We go from there. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.